I'm telling this story years later, because back then, I was just a child, and I wasn't old enough to understand what was really happening to me. But now, I know. Our town was small, hard to find on a map, and not a place anyone would visit by accident. Summers were boring, and winters were unnaturally quiet. People knew each other, but no one truly knew anyone. Everyone locked their doors, turned off their lights early, and once night fell, pretended the outside world didn't exist. That year, winter came early. Snow fell suddenly over the town, making the streets feel narrower and darker than they already were. On our way home from school, our footsteps were swallowed by the snow. Even when we talked, we lowered our voices. We didn't know why. It was instinct. I still remember the day the circus arrived. After school, as I passed through the town square, I heard the music first. It was supposed to be cheerful, but something about it felt wrong, like it was broken. Then I saw the colors: red, yellow, and blue. Too bright, too artificial. An old tent stood in the middle of the square, supported by rusty metal and worn-out ropes. The circus was old. Not vintage, just old. The posters showed smiling faces, heavy makeup, oversized red noses, wide grins. But the longer you looked at them, the more unsettling those smiles became, especially the clown. The clown on the poster was different from the others. He was smiling, but his mouth was too wide. The black paint around his eyes was too dark. And his gaze, it didn't feel like he was looking at you. It felt like he was looking through you. That evening at dinner, I mentioned the circus. My mother listened without much interest. My father said, "They'll be gone in a day or two." No one cared, because circuses came, entertained, and left. Or at least, that's what we believed. The next day, a child went missing. He was 1 year younger than me. We went to the same school. There's no need to say his name, because that name became nothing more than an absence. His mother walked the streets from early morning, knocking on every door, crying. People helped, but there was no hope in their eyes. They knew they were searching for nothing. The police came. They asked questions. They wrote things down. They looked around, but no one stopped in front of the circus. There was entertainment last night. They probably packed up by morning, someone said. They're travelers. They don't stay, said another. But the circus was still there. The tent was still standing in the square. The posters were still hanging, and yet no one turned to look. 3 days later, another child disappeared. This time, silence fell over the town. No one spoke out loud. Mothers watched their children from behind windows. Fathers locked their doors twice. But still, no one said it openly. I did. I went to my mother, my voice shaking, and said, "Mom, the clown is watching us." She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind people make when they're trying to suppress something. A short, tense sound. She patted my head and said, "You watch too many cartoons." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by my window watching the street. Snow had piled up under the streetlight. Everything was motionless. There wasn't even any wind. Just as I was about to turn away, I noticed something. Under the streetlight, in the snow, one of the circus posters was lying there. It shouldn't have been there. Yesterday, it was still in the square. There was no wind, but the poster was slowly swaying, as if someone had just placed it there. That's when a feeling rose inside me. One I couldn't explain but somehow recognized. The feeling you get as a child when you know something is wrong but don't yet have the words for it. After that night, I started seeing the clown everywhere. On my way to school, I thought I saw his reflection in a store window. Walking home, I noticed strange flashes of color at the end of the street. But every time I turned to look, there was nothing. Until I went to the circus. One of my friends said, "Let's just take a look." I agreed, not out of curiosity, but to push the fear away. When we entered the tent, the air felt heavy. There was no popcorn smell, no children laughing, just the scent of old wood and dampness. When the show started, everyone laughed. I didn't, because when the clown stepped onto the stage, he looked at me. He really looked at me, straight through the crowd, directly at me, without blinking. And then he smiled. It wasn't an entertainer's smile. It was the look of someone who had chosen me. At least, that's how it felt. I never went back to the circus after that. But staying away didn't mean he would leave me alone. In the days that followed, something strange settled over the town. No one talked about the circus, but everyone avoided it. Children were called home before evening. Curtains were drawn early. The streetlights seemed dimmer somehow. Adults walked around with expressions that denied knowing something they clearly did. They avoided eye contact, left sentences unfinished. And the children? The children began disappearing, one by one. People stopped calling it missing because no one was found. No traces, no sounds, not even a forgotten object. It was as if someone took them and erased every sign they had ever existed. I stopped sleeping at night. The moment I closed my eyes, the clown's face appeared. That smile, that fixed stare. The worst part was this. Even when my eyes were closed, I could feel him watching me. One morning, my toys had moved. The teddy bear that usually sat by the window was at the foot of my bed. I knew I hadn't moved it. My mother hadn't either, but no one believed me. Then the smaller things began. My door was left slightly open, curtains closed without me touching them. Sometimes late at night, I heard my chair scrape softly across the floor. When I looked, nothing was there. But the room no longer felt the same. And then, that night came. It was the night of the circus's final show. People said they wouldn't go, but the tent was full. It was as if everyone needed to see it one last time. My mother decided not to leave me alone that evening, but for the first time, I wanted to be alone. Because a voice inside me said, if I didn't go, this would never end. I left my house and walked toward the circus. It wasn't snowing, but the air felt heavy. The moon was hidden. The lights of the tent were disturbingly bright, even from a distance. Inside, there was a crowd, but no sound. People weren't laughing or talking. They were just watching. When the show began, the clown came on stage again. This time, he was closer. And this time, he didn't hide it. He stared at me without blinking. Then he announced he needed a small child from the audience. His voice was hoarse, pretending to be cheerful. No one moved. Then he raised his finger and pointed at me. My legs wouldn't move. My heart felt like it was tearing out of my chest, but someone in the crowd pushed me forward. People looked at me as if to say, "Go on, why are you waiting?" I stepped onto the stage. The clown bent down toward me and whispered, "You know me." He didn't know me, but I knew him. We went backstage. The lights went out. The sound of the crowd faded. Suddenly, I found myself in a narrow corridor behind the tent. The walls weren't fabric. They were solid, cold. This wasn't a tent anymore. There were children there, silent, motionless, empty-eyed. Some had cried, but they weren't crying anymore, as if they had forgotten how. The clown dropped his sack to the ground. Inside weren't toys, but small shoes, hair ties, torn pieces of clothing. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The clown knelt down and brought his face close to mine. "You will grow up," he said. "You will forget me," he said. "But I will never forget you." And then darkness fell. I woke up in my own bed. The circus was gone. The tent was gone. The missing children were gone. The town had returned to normal. No one remembered anything. Years passed. I grew up. I left the town. I thought I had left everything behind. Until last year, on Christmas night. I was in my own home, in a new city. Snow was falling. The same silence hung under the streetlights. When I looked out the window, I saw a silhouette beneath the snow. A clown. A child was standing beside him, and that child was me. That's when I understood. He had never left me. He was just waiting for me to grow up. Because some things begin in childhood, and they never truly end.